I'd like to introduce Kell Jay Lim, the head of Grab here in Singapore. He started with them about three and a half years ago or so, when Grab was really nothing here in Singapore from scratch, and has since in that time scaled it. They've got over 40,000 drivers signed up for Grab. That's more than all taxi companies combined here in Singapore. And in just 3 years, I think it's an interesting example of scale in Singapore that we haven't seen a ton of. So that's one of the reasons that we wanted to get him here, hear that story, hear about his path. We'll talk about probably about 30 minutes or so, 30, 45 minutes, and then we'll do a Q&A so you can kind of ask questions. I see somebody from Uber back there, so I don't know if we should. Okay, we'll keep an eye on you, Projal. All right. So anyway, Kell Jay Lim. All right, Kell Jay. So I've got an actual pad of paper here, just in case my phone would have died. So let's start off. So you started your career in consulting and had this, high-flying management consulting career, working with big companies, etc. And then all of a sudden, you make the jump to an unproven startup. Why?
Why? Because you left the previous company. Yeah? No.
We used to work at the same company. So.
Yes. So I get that question a lot. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Really, really humbled to be sharing some of my experiences and some of the lessons learned. Hopefully, you guys find it useful in some way. So, to the question as to why I left, I think timing was a big part of that. As you mentioned, I was in this company. I was quite comfortable. It's quite stable, very secure. And then I joined this company, joined Grab. At that time, no one knows what Grab was about, right? And literally, I didn't know if the company was going to be around in 12 months' time, right? Yes, at that time we've just raised Series A, but I mean, it's still scary, right? But timing was important. So I've had spent 9 years in my previous company, so I thought, hey, if there's a time for me to move, this is probably it. My wife was extremely supportive, so I think that's really, really important, very, very key. When you want to join, I was just joking with Terrence from Green earlier that you want to go into a startup, you need to have a spouse that is have a real job, right? So Grab, if you just for those of you who don't know, Grab actually did not start in Singapore. It started in Malaysia. I'm not the founder of the company. I wish I was. But I did help to start the company in Singapore. I did know a few people who was already working at Grab because they were from my previous company as well. And I knew that I could work really, really well with them. And also then I met Anthony, right? So Anthony, who is the founder of the company, very, very intense guy, right? Super intense, super passionate. But the thing that really convinced me to join him was when he, on the second time we met, he looked me in the eye and said, "I'm going to build the next billion-dollar company," right? And I was thinking to myself at that time, right, this guy is a bit nuts, right? But I like that conviction, that commitment, that passion. So I took the leap. Yeah.
And so maybe tell us about the early days of Grab, right? I mean, I've heard the story of how you started getting some of the initial traction. It's a classic example of doing things that don't scale in the early days. Tell us how you kind of came into this blank slate and started getting people onto the platform.
Yeah, it it was scrappy as hell, right? Really, really scrappy. If you think about startups being like the most, just think as scrappier than what you think. So the first thing we had to do was to convince taxi drivers to use our platform. So then we were thinking to ourselves, okay, where do I find these taxi drivers? Where do they hang out, right? And the one place that they hang out, where we see a lot of taxi drivers, who can guess? Where do you see a lot of taxi drivers like just waiting around? Sorry? Kopitiam is one, which we went as well, but we didn't go. It wasn't the first place we went to. Airport. That's right. So you always see this long queue of taxis, right? At the airport. So we went there against the CAG's, the Changi Airport Group's permission, and so there's this taxi line waiting, and they will just wait in queue to get to the front line. And we've got about maybe 3 to 5 minutes to jump into the taxi. For those who were nice enough to let us jump into the taxi and pitch to them. So we literally had 3 to 5 minutes to pitch to the taxi driver about our app before they reach the front of the line. And we work in teams. We work in pairs, right? The first guy would be the one talking about the app, and the second guy will be taking down his details. So literally we had 3 to 5 minutes to make a sale. Right? And that's how we started. It was pretty intense, quite dangerous as well, because our guys were like running around, in the taxi queue. We were also avoiding the authorities because we were not supposed to do that.
So there must have been a lot of objections, and you must have had to convince them to do it. What was the thing that really got them on board?
The easiest thing was always like say, hey, we're gonna preload your app with $30, right? And that means 100 free jobs for you. Just give it a go, right? Just try it.
So you just get them on there, get them addicted to using it, and then. Okay.
The first thing was just to try it. It's like no risk, no risk. Just try it. Yeah.
And so if we fast forward to now, 3 years later, not a lot of time, right? Over 40,000 drivers. How is that changed over time from an acquisition standpoint? And, you're not still jumping into the back of taxis, I assume.
Well, yeah. So after a while, we're really thankful for a lot of support that we've got from the drivers, the passengers, our partners, investors, and so on. We built a name for ourselves, and then drivers started walking in. So signing up was a little bit easier. I think getting to where we are today took there were a few inflection points, right? The taxis. So the first one was the taxis, and initially we were thinking about which taxi. So there are 5 taxi companies in Singapore, right? And before Grab, there was one number that everybody remembers. I'm not sure if you guys still remember the number, right? Which is the comfort number, basically, 6552-1111, right? And the problem was, while Comfort owns 60% of the taxis on the road, whenever it rains, right, or whenever the train breaks down, very sensitive topic there, but everybody calls one number, right? They just keep calling the Comfort, right? So what happens is, while they own 60% of the taxis, 90% of the calls goes into their call center, and that's why, if those of you who can remember, you can call into Comfort, and then you can be put on hold for like 15 minutes, and then they say, oh, sorry, no taxi, right? So it took a while for us to realize that, right? And then when we realized that, then we started signing up non-Comfort drivers, and then we realized that a lot of them are more receptive of us, right? They were hungrier for jobs, and then all of a sudden, when your default option, which is Comfort, you can't serve you a ride. There's this new kid on the block called Grab, or Grab Taxi at that time, was able to get you a ride, right, during peak hours. Even though it wasn't a Comfort ride, a Comfort taxi, but who cares, right? All you need to do is to get from point A to point B. That's all people want to do.
And so, so specifically your team. There was how many of you in the beginning? There was 5,
maybe
10,
less than 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, as you start acquiring more drivers, that's a lot more work. That's a lot more, communication, and the things that you were doing yourself or your team members, all of a sudden, becomes a lot of work. I think one interesting thing is how you worked through that phase to get to take things up to the next level.
Yeah, we used to let me tell a quick story about how, because I was reminded of this story on my right here. I was happened to be picked up by a Grab car driver who used to be a Grab taxi driver who remembers me back in the old days, right? So he recalled my name. So he was telling me about how we started. We were just reminiscing, right? And he said that one thing because at that time Uber wasn't in taxis at that time yet. We had another competitor called Easy Taxi. So it's this rocket internet funded company, super aggressive. And he was telling me that what he remembered at that time was the very simple thing that why he stuck with Grab was because we paid him on time. We always paid him on time, right? And that was so important to taxi drivers. And I remember the time when we first started, we did not have this automation, right? We hadn't had. Today it's really easy, right? As a driver, you just tap cash out, and within 2 days you see the money in your bank account. Back in those days, I remember there was a time where I literally, because we hadn't received funds yet into our account, so we actually did not have funds to pay the drivers at that time, and so I was in a dilemma, right? Do we delay the payment? Or do we just find some other ways to pay the drivers, right? And I also understood that it was so important for drivers to be paid on time. So what I did was, I went to my bank account, I withdrew whatever money I had. It was in the tens of thousands, and then I got a few of my teammates to manually put it into the ATM machines, right? Of course, we didn't have 40,000 drivers at that time. We had maybe 1,000 drivers, but still, it took us like 2 days, right, to do just that. So it was an example of how scrappy it was, but doing the thing that mattered to the drivers. Of course, over time, it was just not scalable, right? We can't do that now for 40,000 drivers. So we had to invest a lot into automation. I wouldn't even say that we are where we need to be yet. Oftentimes, we need to get more people to do some of this manual work, but we've gotten a lot better with automation.
Now, one thing, it sounds like it was a smooth 3 years. Okay, you went from 0 to the 40,000 drivers to being in everybody's phone. There must have been some big failures along the way as well. Do any specific ones come to mind that you think are useful?
There were many.
You don't have to call it a failure. It could be a learning.
It's a learning, a lesson learned. Yeah. There were many. But there was one that I think will always be sort of etched in my head. This was a time where we were fairly. It was about maybe a year and a half into it. And we were already serving a few 100,000 people every day, and to some extent it was because of the success. It was because of the growth, right? And the service that we were using just came down. It literally came down. We were down for a few hours, and that was perhaps one of the worst times I could recall, and it went down throughout the region, the whole region, and so all the countries. So we were in 6 countries at that time. All the countries we were on standby. We worked through the night. Of course, for me, there's really little much I can do from a product perspective. So the engineering team was just hacking and hammering at it, while the ops team was manually assigning passengers to their drivers, manually. I would call, because I could still track where the drivers are, because we have a GPS tracking on the phones, and I could see where the passengers were making calls. So I would then say, okay, which driver is nearby, and I click on that driver. I call up, hey, uncle, there's a passenger here. Would you mind, picking him up? And they say, okay, they're okay, now I'll call out the passenger. And so we were doing that like the whole night, right? It was it was painful. But that triggered, so it was a Friday, I think. Friday, it was raining. It was a perfect storm, right? It was literally raining. It was literally a storm. And that was when it triggered us to revamp our entire booking system, because it was simply not efficient enough, right? And it took us a couple of months to do that. Well, more than a couple of months. But I think since then we've been a lot more stable. Our uptime has been in the north of 99.9%. But it was a lesson. It was a painful lesson. Yeah.
Any other ones you'd like to offer up? We all know we all know the successes.
I think one is good enough.
One is good enough. We'll save that for another day.
Yeah,
all right. So we switch gears a little bit. So you're originally from Malaysia, but you've been in Singapore for many years. And jumping into a startup like this, especially from coming from a high-flying career in a stable company, is not always looked at very positively. But now we start to see things changing. So you've done that. You've done the big company thing. You've jumped to the startup. Do you have advice for people these days who are coming out of college? We've got a lot of folks here who have just come out, early stage, thinking about getting a job, thinking about starting something. Do you say go work for the big company first, or do you say go join a startup, go start a startup? What you must have an opinion on it at this point.
Yeah, interesting question. I guess everyone is different, right? If I were to look back, is there any regrets leaving that stable company to join Grab? Absolutely not. When I joined Grab, I told myself 12 months. Whether it's successful or not, I will give myself 12 months because, number one, I knew I was going to learn a lot of things. It's not every day you get to build a business pretty much from scratch. And then second thing was I knew I was going to meet a lot of people, right? I get to come for these events. I'm not always here, but I've been on that side as well, meeting a lot of people, and I've met so many people who are now really close friends. So I told myself, 12 months, good or bad, I'll stick with it. Now it's been almost 3 years. Absolutely no regrets. Now, would I have left earlier if I had a chance? So I was 9 years in that company. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I would have left a bit earlier. Yeah, but I think what I learned in that company, in that very structured environment, and the connections I made as well, of course, were very helpful, right? Just to share a little bit about what I did in the previous company, I did customer analytics. So very data-driven, a lot about using data to understand your customers. So that was very, very applicable to what I'm doing right now at Grab. Intellectual rigor is one of our principles at Grab. So yeah, I think there is benefit of you joining a more established company first, fairly low risk, I guess. Although the economy is not that great at the moment, so nothing is for sure. But you learn a lot, right? And then you can apply all these things in your new venture.
So that's for people starting off or looking for a job. You hear a lot these days about multinational companies wanting to learn from startups. So you've been on both sides of the fence now, right? You've seen how a lot of the big guys work, not just here in Singapore, but across Southeast Asia. Now you've been inside this one of the largest, fastest growing startups in the region. How about to those guys? What kind of how can they think and act and be more like a fast growing startup? Maybe speak to the old Kell Jay from before, wow. Right?
Maybe the way I would answer that question is how I see people who move from a MNC into this environment, and what makes them successful. Well, I'm going to start with that, right? So as a company, as a young company, I think young in terms of like we've been around for about 4 years, and young is also because the average age of the team is maybe early 30s. I'm old in the team. I'm the old guy. I think we have done decently well to get to where we are today, but we also realize that for us to get to the next level, we need really senior people, right? People who's been there, who's done that, and has a little bit more gray hair than us. But what's important is, I think if there's one trait that we need is really humility, because as the pioneer members of the company, we have something to offer, but we need also be the first to acknowledge that we need to learn more. And similarly for those guys, right? Those guys who they may be 40, 50-year-olds, right? Senior executives in previous companies who, when they join us, they also need to understand that they can learn from us, right? It's all a new space. So going back to the original question, big companies, right? If they need to be successful, they need to take all the stuff that they've learned over like decades, and I wouldn't say throw it away, but acknowledge that things has changed, right? I was on a panel recently with a very interesting group of people. So there were people from so there was a guy from Lazada, there was a guy from Carousel, and then there was me, and then there was this guy from Canon. Right? He's been around for hundreds of years, 100 over years, like literally, right? I really enjoyed speaking with him because he understands that while Canon has been really successful, but he also knows that this new space. So he was talking about Pokemon Go and how to use all this augmented reality to do marketing. He learns from his team, right? So he forms a young team. He comes out to these events, talk to people who are supposedly more in tune with the latest developments, and evolve from that, right? Yeah.
So we're going to do one last question here, and then we'll get to Q&A, because I think that's an interesting part of this format. We've got a lot of very interesting folks in the crowd here who will ask various questions. So before that, though, what's next? So for Grab, for Singapore, for the industry. I mean, there's just everything in our news feed now is about autonomous vehicles. It's about different business models and ride sharing, et cetera. What are we going to see? Can you give us a little bit of access into your crystal ball of what we're going to see next?
So I'm going to be really careful what I say because of that one Uber guy who's in the room.
Can you just step out for a second?
Yeah. Joel, do you mind? Close your ears. No, so I think there's two parts to it, right? The first thing is still the core, and our core is transport. One of our missions is to make transportation accessible to all, and one way we measure that is the time it takes for your vehicle, for your car, whether it's a taxi or a car, to arrive. So today, more than 50% of our rides arrive within 5 minutes. We want to get that down to 3 minutes. It's interesting because so my wife actually owns a car. I know. I work at Grab, and my wife owns a car. And she owns a car.
And does she drive Grab sometimes, or? Because that would be okay then, right?
Yeah, that'll be fine, yeah. But so she owns a car because her job requires her to get to her workplace in a very short amount of time. So in emergencies. So she said, no, I can't sell my car because I need to get to the hospital within 15 minutes or whatever, right? So to me, the day I can convince her to sell her car, I know I've done my job, right? I know I've done my job. And it's also aligned with the Singapore's government about building a car-light society, right? I mean, of course, owning cars in Singapore I think it is the most expensive place to own a car. So it is very aligned with that. So we continue to work on that front. The second part of it is new areas that we will look into, right? So we spoke about, Anthony spoke about payments as an interesting area that we'll look into that. So I can't reveal too much again for the reasons I indicated earlier, but payments is one area that we would also be very keen to invest in. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, and let's take some questions now from the folks here. What are we going to do? We're going to pass around a mic, or okay? Brian's got the mic, so just raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Really quick guideline. Keep it quick. Keep it short. No pitches to Kell Jay, please. No genius ideas, although I'm sure we all have them. So, Frank.
Hey, Kell Jay. So, US car manufacturers are actually quite ahead in autonomous vehicles. GM, Lyft, Korean, Chinese, Japanese are quite behind. Where do you see Grab's position with the Asian manufacturers and autonomous vehicles?
Asian manufacturers.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't. I guess not specifically at Asian manufacturers, but in the autonomous vehicles in general. We believe that it is something that would definitely complement our existing service, not in a way that it would totally replace drivers. Yeah. For various reasons, right? One of it is because, to be honest, the technology is, it's evolving. A lot of people are interested in it and investing in it, but are we going to see driverless cars roaming around Singapore, the streets of Singapore tomorrow? No, right? But I do believe that there will be certain use cases that is going to be very useful, right? Underserved areas, for example. There are certain locations in Singapore, right? Like whether it's Jurong Island or I think somewhere in the north, I think it's Punggol, where drivers just wouldn't serve, no matter how much you incentivize them, right? And these kind of locations, a driverless vehicle would be useful, right?
Just one quick follow-up. You're in the space. What do you think the impact of autonomous vehicles on insurance will be?
Wow, to be honest, I'm not really in a position to comment on that, but it is a very hot topic about with regards to autonomous vehicles. Like, who's at fault? In an accident, who's at fault, right? I can't comment on that, to be honest.
And Frank, who are you here with today?
So I'm with a company called Spike Labs, which is an accelerator and fund.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Next question.
Hi, Kell Jay. Thanks so much. I'm Kai Yang. Work for a consulting firm. So I'm just curious, you mentioned how consulting...
Same consulting firm?
No. You mentioned how consulting, working there for quite a while helped you in your subsequent move to Grab. Was there anything that it didn't prepare you so well for?
Yeah, lots. Like I was probably like 10% prepared, 90% not prepared, right? The thing about consulting is you tend to do like so first of all you would be doing more of the analysis, the planning part of the stuff, right? And then execution will be handed over to the clients. So that part, you can't be prepared for that, right? And the other thing was you think that in consulting you're pretty fast paced, but when I joined Grab, it's totally different pace. So I'll give you an example. When I was just before I left my previous company, I was working for a client. in Indonesia, I wouldn't say who was so slow in doing things. Those of you who've been working in Jakarta, no offense to our Indonesian friends, but it's just the way it is, right? It's traffic jams, people don't turn up on time, blah, blah, blah. It took us like a year to launch a campaign, like literally a year, right? And then I joined Grab. We came up from conceptualization to execution of the campaign, it took 3 days, right? So that was the contrast, right? So I wasn't prepared for that, right? But it was fun, it was exciting. The other thing was, in a consult, so when you're consulting a MNC, usually it's all about how do you increase revenue or reduce cost, right? Usually, in a startup like Grab, in a fast-growing startup, it's all about growth. It's all about, so growth is your only currency, right? It's not revenues, it's not profits, right? That comes later, but in a very early stage, it's all about growth. It's about, I remember being asked by Anthony and the investors, say, I'm going to give you this amount of money, it's in the millions. How are you going to spend this in this amount of time? Right? You must spend this money. It's not that you got to stretch this money as long as possible. You need to spend this money. What I want to see is the growth. So that concept was totally alien to me at that time. Yeah.
What about your slide making skills?
Completely deteriorated, right?
So you haven't made a slide in how many years?
Well, pretty much since I joined. But I have brought in some people who help me with the slides, so that helps. Yeah, I don't miss it though.
Okay, next. Yep. See Lewis over here.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for sharing. My question is, so I was quite taken by your comment that you're a data kind of guy, right? So since you're the country head, have you seen the data from other countries? So is there any difference in terms of behavior, in terms of the consumers or the drivers, based on the data?
Yeah, I mean there are. There's definitely a lot of differences. So let's talk about, let's say drivers, for example, right? Let's compare Singapore with Thailand. So the productivity of drivers in Singapore is actually quite high, relatively, right? If you ask any taxi driver, full time, they will say on average they will do about 25, maybe 30 rides a day. It's quite a lot. And then when I look at the data across, because I had the benefit of also leading the analytics team for a while at Grab. So I was looking at the data and I say, hey, Thailand's driver productivity was maybe, instead of, compared to maybe 20, 25, it was like 8 or 10 or something like that, right? So the natural thing was then go to the country head in Thailand and say, hey, you guys are not doing your work, right? Like, please go and get your drivers to do more jobs. But then obviously, when you drill down further, you realize that there's a lot of other factors that's contributing to this, right? So Thai people in general, the psychology of the drivers are a bit different. So they'll look at, okay, this is certain things, this is a certain target I would hit, and as soon as I hit those targets, I'll stop driving. I'll do something else. I'll just chill out. I'll play. A lot of them like to play that checkers thing on the side of the road, and it's just the way it is, right? And also because of traffic, obviously. Also, traffic will have a huge impact on how productive a driver can be in a given day. Yeah. So yeah, I mean there's definitely nuances between behaviors between countries.
Great, thanks. Lewis, you're with, where are you from?
In a small local consultancy firm.
Consulting, okay.
Consultants,
All right.
yeah.
No, consultants here, yeah. Right.
So hi, you mentioned about doing things that don't scale, but at some point of time, as a company, you have to scale. So what, in your opinion, is that point of time? When should you start thinking that, okay, I have to start scaling or I'll die?
When the investors keep knocking on my door and say, hey, why aren't you scaling? No, I'm kidding. Wow, I think it's almost, that feeling of needing to scale is always there. Even now, we still need to scale. Last year we grew about 4x as a company. This year, the expectation is that we need to grow another 4x or more. But what's more important is doing what we are doing today. Continue to do what we are doing today is not going to help us to scale, because we can't, like in the old days, I can't keep, putting in cash into the ATM machine myself. So we need to think about the different ways of scaling, and it would reach a point where we actually have to reach out for help, like external help. Now the core stuff that we do, which is the app and the platform and the system behind the app, we keep it in-house for sure. But there were other non-core stuff that we actually had to outsource. Right? One of it was our customer experience team, because obviously when we were growing, the number of calls coming in, number of tickets that we were generating was also growing in tandem, and it came to a point where it didn't make sense for us to keep adding bodies to the team. So that's where we thought, okay, we need help, and there are people out there who can do a much better job at a lower cost. So it made sense for us to outsource. So that helped us to continue to break new grounds.
I think outsourcing is a great idea. I run an outsourcing company, so thanks. And you're at a startup right now. You Facebook. Okay, I've heard of them.
We give you a lot of business.
Follow-up question, but what about acquiring customers? Like you used to hop into taxis. Mm-hmm. So what point of time did you realize that, okay, I can't hop onto taxis anymore? We need to think of something that's more scale.
Yeah.
Okay, so question is about acquiring customers now versus hopping into taxis. Yeah.
So that's a very tricky question, simply because yes, on one hand we want to be able to do everything online, for example, yeah. But on the other hand, safety is a very important part of what we do. So, at least in Singapore, actually in Singapore, I made a decision to not move everything online for driver signups, because we wanted to meet the drivers, every single one of them, verify who they are, and they're not like some other, they're not who they are, not who they claim to be, and also to inspect the cars. So I think I was talking to, sorry, what's her name again? Ginny. So Ginny was giving me some feedback about using Grab, and she got into a car where there was no seat belts. So that's of course my fault as the head of Singapore, because what we should have done was to catch that, right? Because when we inspect the cars, we need to make sure that all the cars have a safety belt, right? That's incredibly important. And so it's really a balance. So that part we decided that, okay, we're not going to go all the way to full automation, right? We're still going to put some human interaction to make sure that safety is not compromised. There are other areas where we do then try to completely scale, right? So let's talk about payments, for example. Like how do we pay our drivers? In the past, how do drivers pay us actually, right? So we have a prepaid system with the drivers, because we deal with cash, right? So so think of it as a prepaid, like an EasyLink card or a prepaid system that you have, right? The driver will top up a certain amount, and then each time he takes a job with us, we'll deduct a commission. That's where we make the revenues. But in the past, they had to come to us to top up. So one way to top up is to come to our office, or in some other countries, like in Vietnam, for example, we actually send people to them. Can you imagine, like they've got maybe, I don't know, let's say 10,000 drivers, right? And these guys, they need to top up their account, otherwise they can't take jobs, we don't earn, we can't run a business. So we used to have a big army of people to just go out there and just help them to top up, right? So that wasn't scalable for sure, right? So in Singapore, what we did was we partnered with DBS Bank, so that every single one of their ATM machines, So there's like 900 ATM machines around the island, where drivers can go to top up their credit wallet, so that they can continue using the service. So these are the things that I think really helped us to scale. Yeah.
Great. All right, we'll do another question. Ken? Yep.
Hello, I'm Ken. I own a small car rental company, so I'm wondering what is your opinion on what is going to happen to all the private cars in the future? Because from what you are saying, it's probably best if you own the cars or the big companies own the cars to ensure the best quality and safety.
For now, I think, so a lot of rental companies are benefiting from this, right? I think you read in the papers, number of rental cars like quadrupled over in 1 year or something like that, right? So that's good. Over time, yes, on one hand, we would want to control because of quality. But at the same time, we also recognize that running a fleet business is not easy. Yeah, there are companies out there who has been doing it for many, many years. There are certain efficiencies that they have achieved. So, simple example. This is unique to Singapore, though, right? Bidding for COEs. Yeah, that's a skill. Right? It's really a skill, right? If we had ambitions to buy 1,000 cars, I'm looking at Uber there, right? To buy 1,000 cars in one go, right? In one bid, you're going to single-handedly move the market, COE prices, right? And imagine if the COE prices go up by, let's say $1,000, right? Because of that, your cost to buy the car went up by $1 million, just like that, right? So the answer to your question is really yes and no, right? Yes, we do want to control certain part of that ecosystem, but on the other hand, we also rely on partners, good partners.
Thanks. All right. We've got about 15 minutes left. Why don't we do another question back here in the back? Jun Ishikawa.
I have a question regarding who should be the one running the operation in the country. If let's say I'm Japanese, by the way, I'm setting up the small sharing economy company in Singapore. Do you think we have a chance to win?
So your question is, if you were to start a ride-sharing company in Singapore,
As a Japanese company, right? Just coming into the market, jumping in.
you want my honest answer? I mean,
No, because if you are to choose the company, the person to run the operation in the certain country, do you choose the people from outside of your country, or do you think you should choose the people from that country?
Right, to join Grab, you mean?
Yes.
I see. Okay, good question. So the question is, would you hire someone locally versus outside of Singapore, right, or the region to join the company, especially for operations? No?
More to manage, actually.
To manage the company? Okay. So Grab consists of two key parts, right? One is the online world and then the offline world, right? The online world will be all your, the engineers, the data scientists, the UX, UI guys, the user trust and all that. So those guys, we actually look everywhere. So we started out looking for these people around the region. We've sort of tapped them out, and now we're looking elsewhere. And the simple reason, right? Because there's a huge, there's so much we need to do on the product side, and therefore we need all the engineers that we can get. And we literally hunt everywhere around the world. So no qualms about getting people from around the world. In fact, the Singapore government actually encourages that. So for data scientists, for example, it's a profession that it's a global shortage of that. The government recognizes it. They support it. And then, but as for the operation side, the offline side, what we call the offline side, We take a hyper-local approach to that. So what that means is that local teams, local strategies, local execution, right? So while a certain company runs a ice cream campaign every year, we do a durian delivery campaign, right? And it's and it's crazy. The durian campaign really caught us by surprise, right? We did it for I think we did it for 2 days. The first time we did it, we had over 1 million requests in 2 days. I mean, of course, we couldn't meet all the requests, right? But it's just nuts. I think something to do with, I don't know what's up with Singaporeans and durians, right? So that's an example of a hyper-local thing that we do. So we do have local heads in each of the markets that we operate in. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we'll do 2 more questions. So, yeah, in the back, I can't see your name tag. Kevin. And name and company, please.
Name of the company is DrawCrowd. It's a social network that serves as a crowdfunding platform for creative people. You mentioned about Grab having tremendous growth and then also tremendous expectation of growth. I see Grab promo pretty much every week or right after Uber has a new promo. So I'm wondering, is spending money the most effective strategy in growth for you guys? And how do you measure if that is spent effectively?
So we measure that spend very, very religiously, right? So yes, we've been blessed with a lot of funding, but it's still our responsibility to spend every dollar responsibly, right? So the thing is, in an environment that we operate in right now, where there is another player who's willing to spend as much, if not more, we will need to respond. Right? It's not something that it's not a first option for us. Yeah, but sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, right? Having said that, there is a pattern to the crazy, to the chaos, right? I can't really share everything here, but basically the line of thinking is, you've gone out there, you acquire all these users. How do you then keep them on your platform, right? What are the things that you're gonna do that would differentiate yourself from the other guy and keep them on your platform, right? Because you can't be running this thing forever. You can't be running these promotions all forever, right? So that's how we think about it. I obviously can't share too much beyond that. Yeah.
Thanks. All right, and last question. Right here.
You actually help move people around, right? You have quite a few companies that help to move food around. Yes, and I was here at a fireside talk with the Ninja Van, for example, that help moving goods around. We spoke about autonomous cars, for example. Do you see with those 4 types of any form of possible convergence from moving people around to moving something else or moving generally things around?
So the question is, do I see us moving into non-people transport, I guess, in a way, right? Yeah. So the short answer to that is only when it makes sense, only when there is synergistic benefits of doing that. So let me give you an example, right? In Indonesia, in Jakarta, we have a service called Grab Express, where we actually do deliver stuff, right? But it's point to point, right? We also have Grab Food, which is food delivery. And the reason why we did that in Jakarta but not in Singapore is because we already had this massive fleet of motorcycle drivers, right? So it made sense because they're not delivering people all the time, or it's also easier for them to move into, I mean, it's the same vehicle doing something else, right? So the answer is only when it makes sense for us, when there's synergistic value to it. In terms of autonomous vehicles, I mean, as I said earlier, we do see it complementing the current service that we have. The technology is probably some ways to go. Yes, you can try out an autonomous vehicle today with the Grab app. Just for those of you who don't know, we're running a pilot with a company called Notonomy, and you can sign up for the trial through the Grab app. Right? Look for the RoboCar icon on it, and you can try it out. But where we are with the technology is, I mean, to me, it's still quite nascent. It will still take a number of years before we start seeing a lot of, driverless cars driving around Singapore. Having said that, Singapore is probably one of the most conducive environments to do a trial for autonomous vehicles. Yeah, thanks.
Great. And with that, we'll wrap up the chat with Kell Jay. Thanks for coming out here.
Thank you.
We've got more beer in the back. There's a lot of cool people in this room. I see people from incubators, investors, VCs, startups, MNCs. We've got a bunch of people from LinkedIn here tonight. So kind of mingle around. If you need introductions, let me know. I'm Patrick, and you can ask my team as well. So anyway, thanks. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.